Hello. I decided to come out into my garden shed this morning, or my garden studio as I like to call it, and from here I can see a small pear tree that I have, which actually has quite a lot of fruit on it now, and I tried one of these pears. I wasn't sure if they were going to be edible, but it actually tasted alright. And I also have this small tomato plant that a friend gave me at the beginning of the summer, which has quite a few tomatoes on it now, though they're a black variety of tomato, which I'd never heard of before. But yeah, they taste all right as well. So it reminds me that we are fast approaching autumn. So I thought I would come up with an autumnal reading list to discuss in case you want to join me in reading any of these titles, or if you have read any of these books, I'd love to hear your thoughts about them in the comments below. And I know these books could be read at any time of the year, but it is nice to match your reading with the seasonal period. And a number of these books, because of the subject matter of them, it kind of reminds me of the autumnal period. I quite often like to read like darker, mysterious books around this time, or thrilling books, or books that are like a bit witchy, or or like have some sort of like central mystery to them, or they might just be books that I've been wanting to get to. So or the covers of them might have a kind of like autumnal theme. So yeah, I'm going to go through and talk about all of these books. I've picked out 12 of them. First, there is The Schoolhouse by Sophie Ward, which was first published earlier this year and is a novel that I've been meaning to get to because I loved her first novel, Love and Other Thought Experiments, so much. And September, even though I've not been in school for many, many years, it still reminds me of like going back to school. So it seems sort of appropriate to read a novel called The Schoolhouse, which is about a woman that lives a fairly secluded life and works in a library in London, but she had quite a difficult childhood going to an experimental school in the 1970s, and she thought she had left all this behind and is trying to kind of block it out of her memory. But then a girl goes missing in her present time, and she gets a letter from a former teacher, and it kind of brings all of these memories back. And I think there's a central mystery to this novel, and I've heard it's very different from her first novel, but yeah, she's such a great writer. I'm really intrigued to see what this story holds. Groundskeeping by Lee Cole, which obviously the cover reminds me sort of autumn, and it's about a man named Owen in his 30s who had quite a rocky period in his 20s, but he's kind of settled down in his life to work at as a groundskeeper at a small college in the Appalachian foothills. And at this college he meets a writer-in-residence named Alma, who comes from a prestigious immigrant family who was originally from Boston, and they form a relationship with each other, but they obviously come from very different places in life. And so it's the story of their relationship and their connection and misconnections with each other. A longtime favorite author of mine is Anne Tyler, and I've still not read her new novel French Braid, which follows a family story which Anne Tyler writes about so well and really dynamically. And this follows a particular family that aren't really that close to each other anymore, that only went on one family holiday with each other in 1959, and the events of that weekend kind of reverberate throughout the years and their relationships with each other. So it follows their stories, and just really looking forward to re-entering Anne Tyler's world. And I'm so glad that she's still writing novels, even though she announced a few years ago that she was going to be retiring. A real adventurous sounding novel is Winchelsea by Alex Preston, which is set in the mid-1700s in a smuggling town, and it follows the story of a teenage girl whose father is murdered by people he thought were his friends. So she and her brother go on a number of seafaring adventures. It's a story of vengeance and transformation, and just sounds really atmospheric. Autumn also just seems like a good time to read some historical fiction. So like Winchelsea, Winchelsea. The Bewitching is also a historical novel set in the 16th century in a town in Scotland and follows a sharp-tongued older woman who is accused of witchcraft, and she kind of shrugs this off at first, but then events quickly escalate and become more serious as more people are accused. And this is based on a real-life historical incident, and just has a beautiful cover. Another historical novel, The Dance Tree by Kiran Millwood Hargrave, and this time it is set in the 1500s in Strasbourg and is about a woman that starts dancing continuously. And is she possessed by the devil, like she's accused by some, or does she have a mental or physical condition? But this sort of spreads to other women who also start dancing, and this is also based on a real historical case. A novel set closer to our present times is The Perfect Golden Circle by Benjamin Myers, which is set in 1989 in rural England and follows two men that embark on this curious mission where at night they go out into the fields and create these elaborate crop circles, which then become really famous, and people are really intrigued by the mystery of them. So it follows their story and the strange bond that they form with each other over this period of time. And Benjamin Myers writes so beautifully about the natural world, but also class conflict in this country. So yeah, I'm really excited to read his new novel. A Door Behind a Door by Yelena Moskovich. And this sounds like a really intriguing story. It's about a woman that grew up in the Soviet Union, but she's since moved to Wisconsin and settled down with another woman, and she thinks she left all of that behind, but then she receives a phone call that sort of brings it all back. And this involves a number of mysteries, like what happened to her brother when she was younger, but also an unexplained murder during her childhood and a supernatural dog. So yeah, it just gives me kind of autumnal Halloween type vibes. Speaking of mysteries, that always brings to mind Agatha Christie, and a really unique recent book is No One May Remain by Haitham Hussein, which is a narrative biography about the author's experiences as a Syrian refugee traveling across Europe and encountering a number of different people. And he describes his experiences but intersects his narrative with a kind of conversation with Agatha Christie's autobiography, Come Tell Me How You Live, and but also her mystery novel, And Then There Were None, which yeah is just a really unique combination. So I'm so intrigued to see how this plays out. Another really intriguing and interesting newer author is Danny Denton, and he has a new novel called All Along the Echo, which is about a radio talk show host in Ireland and his producer who go on this road trip across the country as a publicity stunt where they're having a giveaway competition of the car that they're driving. But as their journey continues, it grows increasingly surreal, and it sort of intersects with current political events and the culture of the country. And I read this author's first novel called The Early King and The Kid in Yellow, which is unlike anything else that I've read in recent years, so I'm really intrigued to see what he did next. A Terrible Kindness by Joe Browning Wroe, and the cover of this has real autumnal vibes with leaves falling around this boy. And this is another historical novel based on a real-life disastrous incident in Aberfan in October 1966, when a coal mine landslide completely covered a school school and killed a number of children and people, and it's about a man who becomes involved in the aftermath of that disastrous event. And I heard from a number of people that read this book that it's a really beautiful and moving story. And finally on my list I have The Instant by Amy Liptrot, which follows the author's journey from living in quite a remote place to moving to Berlin and this urban landscape, and about her experiences there and difficulties adjusting there, but also about the nature that she finds within this urban environment. This was recently listed for the Wainwright Prize. I did a whole video about the nature and conservation books that were nominated for that award, and yeah, it's one I've just been really wanting to get to. So those are all of the books in my autumnal reading list. But yeah, let me know if you want to join me in reading any of these books, or if you have any like thoughts or feelings about them, if you've read them before yourself and would recommend them or not, or do you have any other autumnal books that you're looking forward to getting to or rereading. And you can tell the sun is moving around in the sky, so it's now hitting my face in this way, so I'm gonna stop. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye bye.